The next lesson in Unit 2 polynomials is the second method in factoring. The last lesson was factoring using GCF. And this next method is going to use some GCF. Actually, you'll be using GCF in all the factoring techniques. That's usually the first thing we're looking for. But we're going to be factoring using grouping. And grouping is used for four terms. There has to be four terms, or we're going to be using four terms when we're using the method of grouping. All right, I've got maybe about 3 or 4 problems to go over. The directions will say factor. Number 1, I've got 21 minus 7y plus 3x minus xy. So I've got 4 terms. In every single factoring problem that you see, you should be looking for a GCF for all 4 terms, or 3 terms, or 2 terms, no matter how many terms there are. So if I take a look here, nope, I can't, there's no GCF. So before we say prime, we're going to use the method of grouping. That means I'm going to group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. So I'm going to put parentheses here, and I'm going to put parentheses here. Notice there's a plus. You have to have a plus there. We're going to be taking a look at a problem where there is no plus in what you need to do. All right, so what we're going to do is now use GCF for the first parentheses and the second parentheses. If we take a look at the first parentheses, the GCF is 7. 21 divided by 7 is 3. 7 divided by 7 is 1. That cancels. I'm left with y. Now I'm going to take the GCF out of the second parentheses, which is x. 3x divided by x, the x's cancel. I'm left with 3. The x's cancel. I'm left with y. All right, now I'm going to stop here and look at those parentheses. They have to be exactly the same. If they're not, either you factored wrong or something went wrong, because they have to be the same. I'm going to take what's on the outside and I'm going to group them together in one parentheses. So that's 7 plus x. And then I'm only going to take one of the parentheses. Since they're both the same, I'm only going to take one of them. And I'm going to multiply those together. You're actually factoring out a 3 minus y. That's where that comes from. And then you're left with 7 plus x. Let's take a look at example number 2. And again, I could check this by using the box or FOIL method if you want to make sure that's correct. Number 2, let's do this one. Let's do 5h squared minus 10hj plus h minus 2j. This is a good one. I like this one. All right. I'm looking for a GCF for all 4. I don't see it, so I'm going to start my grouping. I'm going to put parentheses here, and I've got my plus that's going to stay there. Now, in the first parentheses, I'm looking for a GCF. I'm going to take out a 5 and an h. So 5h squared divided by 5h is h, minus 10 divided by 5 is 2. The h's cancel. I'm left with j. Now, if I take a look at the second parentheses, there's no GCF. So at that point, I have to make sure that this is the same as this, and it is. So I'm just going to bring that down. I'm good because what's in parentheses is now the same. So I'm going to take what's on the outside and I'm going to group it together, but it's not 5h plus blank. That's really a 1. So if there's no number, that's really a 1. And then h minus 2j. There's 2 of them, you just take one of them. So that's 5h plus 1, and then h minus 2j. Number 3. We're going to do 4 of these. Let's do 4ax plus 14ay minus 10bx minus 35by. Now, if you notice, well, let's go through the process here. If I take a look at all 4 terms, I do not have a GCF. So I'm going to group. But here's what happens when I group. I have to have a plus, and I don't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group that minus with the 10, and I'm going to put a plus. That minus now becomes a negative 10, and that minus stays with the 10. It becomes a negative. And you have to put that plus there. If we take a look at the first parentheses, let's take out a 2a. That's the GCF in the first parentheses. I'm left with 2x plus 7y. Now, the second parentheses, they're both negatives. If you notice, I've got 2 negatives here, but this is 2 positives. This parentheses has to have the same signs as this parentheses. So what we're going to do is we're going to factor out a negative along with whatever the GCF is. So 10 and 35 is 5. And since I want to get rid of that negative, it's going to be negative 5. And then I'm also going to take out a b. So negative 10 divided by negative 5 is a positive 2. The b's cancel. I'm left with x. Negative 35 divided by negative 5 is a positive 7. The b's cancel. I'm left with y. So if I now take a look, it's exactly the way I want it. It's 2x plus 7y. They're both positive. If you did not take out this negative and you left it a positive, I would be left with a negative here and a negative here, and then you'd have to factor out the negative for another step, basically. So I'm going to group these 2 together. So this becomes 2a minus 5b, and then 2x plus 7y. We're going to try one more like this one. So 2a minus 5b, and then 2x plus 7y. Number 4, last one. I've got 12xy minus 28x minus 15y plus 35. So 12xy minus 28x minus 15y plus 35. All right, if I take a look at this, I don't have a GCF, so I'm going to group the first 2 terms together. And this negative is going to stay with the 15, and I'm going to put in a plus there. The first parentheses, the GCF is 4x. If I take out a 4x, 12 divided by 4 is 3. The x's cancel. I'm left with y. 28 divided by 4 is 7, and the x's cancel. Now the second parentheses, if you notice, this is a positive. If this is a positive, this has to be a positive. And it's not. This is a positive, this is a negative. So I know I have to factor out a negative. And I should be checking here. This is a negative, this is a positive. This has to be a negative. So I know I have to factor out a negative, whatever the GCF is. So 15 and 35, the GCF is 5. They don't have a y in common, so it's just minus 5. Negative 15 divided by 5 is 3. And the y stays. 35 divided by a negative 5 is negative 7. So I'm going to group what's on the outside together. I've got 4x minus 5, and then I've got 3y minus 7. And that's factoring by grouping.